Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pink Table Talk Online. I am your host, Loria Reed, and we are so excited that you decided to tune in to our Hope TV station with our women's ministry who's come up with this great Pink Table Talk. First of all, big shout out to you guys for watching and making this a great success, and to our Women of Hope ministry, which is our women's ministry at the House of Hope Atlanta, for coming up with such great content. I am so excited about being your host, but there are a whole group of women behind me who are giving us those great ideas. So thank you so much to them, and our staff pastor, Pastor Cherise Cross, as well as our co-coordinator, Ms. Deidre Stafford. With that being said, today, you all know the routine. Go ahead on and share, like this, let everyone know that we're on. We've got another great topic. It's a little heavier than usual, but it's much needed. We're talking about domestic violence today. Our topic is love doesn't hurt. And so many people have been dealing with that, especially during our pandemic, being quarantined and being in the house. A lot of domestic violence issues have flared up, and we really want to talk about that from a female standpoint. So today, as I'm sharing, as you're sharing, I want you guys to know who we have on today. We've got two great guests, and I'm so excited to have them. Our first guest is a public interest lawyer who represents low-income families as well as elderly clients in civil matters throughout Central Georgia. And 95% of her cases that she represents are survivors of domestic violence. So could you please welcome my friend who's here today, Miss Tamika Daniel. So glad you're with us today.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for asking.
Yes, ma'am. And our next guest that we have coming up, she is a labor-backed progressive businesswoman and Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate of Georgia. She's running for the seat currently held by David Perdue. She is just awesome. We love her. She comes to our church just unannounced and just hangs out with us, not just because it's election time. And we love her so much. She's a friend of our show and a friend of Dr. Edie Smith, and we're so glad to have you. Miss Sarah Amico. Hello, Miss Amico.
Hello, Loria. Thank you so much for having me, especially for such an important conversation. And Tamika, I'm honored to be here with you. House of Hope has become our second church family, and it's good to be back with y'all.
Yes, ma'am. I'm so glad to have you. And to have both of you guys here at the same time, I feel so important right now.
Oh, you are, darling. You are.
I know, and for us to talk about such a heavy subject of domestic violence, it really helps to kind of bring a lighthearted approach to it so that the information isn't lost. So ladies, if you're listening, please let your friends know, even if they're not domestic violence situation, everybody needs to hear what we've got to talk about today. So I'm going to start, Tamika, with you. One of the questions, and I'm just going to shout this out really quickly. She has an event every year called Secrets and Stilettos, where she talks about everything from domestic violence, control and power. And I learned so much just coming to that event that I had no clue about. So if you're ever, shout out to that. If you ever Secrets and Stilettos, that's something that you need to do. But I want to talk to Tamika about, for people like myself who've never experienced that, but we see other women who go through it. And we always ask the question, why does she stay in something like that? Why does she continue, whoever the woman may be, why does she continue to take these situations, whether it be verbal abuse or physical abuse? So from your standpoint, what have you seen, and why do many women stay in situations like that?
I am so glad you asked me that question, because that's probably the question that I get asked the most. And I will start with my general tagline. Let's stop asking why does she stay, but let's ask why does he feel like it's okay to abuse her? No woman wants to be abused. No woman wants to be in an abusive situation, but there are many things that keep a woman in a situation because she feels like she has no options. He has possibly isolated her from her family. I see a lot of clients who have been forbidden to work. So he is the sole provider. He has told her over and over again, you're not going to make it without me. You don't have any support. You have nowhere to go. No one's going to want you. And if you hear that long enough, you start to believe it. And so she starts to feel hopeless. And if she's not connected with a community that will let her know what's available out there for her, then she may think that she is stuck and she may not be able to leave.
Wow. Wow. Never thought about it that way. And Ms. Amico, the question for you that I have, I know that you have a strong stance on domestic violence. I've been to your website and looked up your information as well. And I want you to talk from the standpoint of why this is so important to you. You kind of shared offline your dealings with domestic violence survivors. So could you just share with why that's an important platform for you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Loria and I were speaking earlier, the summer after my first year of college, it was time to go and get a job or a summer internship. And my heart, I felt called to work in a domestic violence shelter in the town where I grew up. And it was a really eye-opening experience. I've had a heart for service for as long as I can remember. I spent many years working in soup kitchens, homeless shelters. But that was my first interaction really being in a domestic violence shelter, in a place where in many instances you really couldn't share the address of where you were going for my internship for the summer. So it was an eye-opening experience, but I think it's also deeply connected to why I feel so strongly about having economic empowerment for women, and investing in our women and girls and making sure that they have the confidence to know they can make it, and making sure that our criminal justice system, especially in these incredibly trying times in our country, making sure that our criminal justice system is one that's trusted by the communities, by every community. And I think in the absence of that, you leave some of these women and families, women and children, at risk, that they don't have somebody to reach out to help. So for me, the experience started there. And then over the years, it's just something that I have felt passionately about speaking out on. And as a candidate for the U.S. Senate, it's one of the reasons I am so passionate about reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. To me, it is absolutely and utterly shameful that the U.S. Senate has not taken that action.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for that.
And Maria,
going
if
back,
I could,
go ahead.
I just want to piggyback on that. We want to talk about economic empowerment, and think about it. If you are in a domestic violence situation where your life was in danger, and the solution that was provided to you was you need to leave your home as you know it now, you need to pack up your family, you need to move. Think about all that goes with that. So you've got to find a new place to live. You got to get first and last month's rent. You have to get your kids enrolled into a new school. You have to have transportation to be able to move. You have to have help to be able to move. You've got to pick up your life. You've got to get that utilities established. You've got to have groceries to put in this new place. And oftentimes we see situations where they're being asked to do this within a matter of 48 hours. Realistically speaking, how many of us would be able to do something like that?
Wow. That makes so much sense.
Particularly when it requires, a first and last month's rent, a security deposit. There really is, when we talk about the social safety net, Tamika's exactly right. It always disproportionately impacts women and children, whether that's WIC or cuts to food stamps, the SNAP program, Medicaid, this country's failure to redefine poverty since the 1960s to expand access to Medicaid, particularly in the middle of a pandemic where so many people are stuck at home. I think New York reported on ABC News this morning a 30% year-on-year increase in calls to its domestic violence hotline. I mean, it's just really something that we have got to start to address in this country: economic security and empowerment for women, but also making sure that the safety net has not become an extraordinarily, moth-eaten net for families who really need it. I think a lot of these families end up staying because they worry that they can't make those first and last months security deposits and rent. They can't get health care for their kids if they leave. They don't know if they can get them enrolled in a school. So these are really critical issues, more so now maybe than ever.
Wow. Wow. Makes so much sense. And I'm hearing the passion of both of you talking. And I was going to start out with Tamika. I know that you have on here 95% of your cases are domestic violence survivors. How do you wake up every morning to have to deal in a heavy subject like that every day? What prompted you to want to assist women, mostly women, I'm sure, in a lot of these cases?
I started as an intern with Georgia Legal Services 18 years ago, and that was my first introduction to domestic violence. I always get asked, are you a survivor? Have you ever gone through something like this? And I haven't, but working with these women just struck a match in me and helped me realize that I wanted to be the voice for those who felt like they didn't have a voice. Running into these women who constantly have been told no, who have been degraded, who have been embarrassed, who have been brutalized in ways that I can't even describe, I knew that there was something inside of me and that forced me. I didn't feel like I had a choice. I felt like I was forced to take this as a career path. And it absolutely has been the best decision that I've ever made. I had a client one day walk out of the courtroom with me, and she told me, thank you for giving me my voice back. And that's, I get confirmation like that all the time. It lets me know that I am doing exactly what God calls me to do, because I do feel like I'm walking in my purpose and I'm helping give these women their voice back. It's a tough thing. I do a lot of shopping online, and those are the things that I have to do for self-care, because self-care is important when you work with victims of domestic violence day in and day out. You start to internalize some of those things. So you have to kind of unplug. I have a great prayer life. I have a very supportive family that understands me, and they give me what I need. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I look in her eyes, and she is my biggest inspiration. She is one of the reasons why I'm committed to doing things like teen dating violence presentations across the state of Georgia, because she's going to be in middle school. And what the statistics are showing is that these relationships are starting younger and younger. The youngest young lady who came up to me after a presentation was 11 years old, and she shared with me that her 17-year-old boyfriend had been physically abusing her. And that just blew my mind. Never in a million years would I have thought that something like that would be going on in middle school, let alone with an 11-year-old. And so that inspires me to keep going.
Wow. And with that being said, Sarah, I know that you are just as passionate about equal rights, even with domestic violence, whatever it may be, for women, the economic side of things. And what prompted you to have the passion that you have when you speak? Just as Tamika spoke about her position with it, how did you get your start, and what prompted you to want to be in this fight?
Yeah, I think it's those early times volunteering. It is, similar to Tamika. When you see the devastation this wreaks on women and families, I think for people of good conscience, it's impossible to ignore, to be honest. And I will say, having two daughters as well, my daughters are 7 and 9, has only further emboldened me to fight on behalf of women and families. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to run for public office. If you think about it, whether it's the wage gap, the fact that women make 83 cents on the dollar for men, and for women of color, that's significantly worse. Whether it is the lack of access to small business loans and credit to start their own version of the American dream, whether it is, failure on behalf of our state and federal government to take action on reasonable gun control. The data is very clear, by the way, that intimate partner violence and homicides declines precipitously when there are reasonable red flag laws in place. And so for me, it started with those early days as a volunteer in a domestic violence shelter, but it has become a passion in terms of how I see the role of fighting for women and families in public service. And that means everything from economic opportunity to gun safety laws, universal background checks, red flag laws, closing the boyfriend loophole, to also making sure that we do at the federal level what we can, for example, with the Violence Against Women Act, to protect these women and families, to make the penalties severe for those who would abuse and mistreat women. This is the foundation. You cannot have an economy where half of your population is not empowered and expect it to reach its full potential. And I will tell you, all of that is wrapped up as a woman of faith in what I believe about the dignity and worth of every human being, that we were all created in the image of the Creator. There is no carve out for gender or race or orientation, that we are worthy of dignity and respect and safety. We are equal under the law. And, if you think about the Corinthians verse that so many of us hear at weddings, right? Love is patient. Love is kind. These are the messages that we should be instilling in women and girls from the time they can understand what we're saying. And it's what we should be living out in our actions, whatever our career is. So while Tamika is working to give people their voice back, what a beautiful phrase your client gave you, Tamika. I want to be a champion on the front lines, creating the kind of legal framework to prevent you from having as many clients. And I think that we can all agree when you get to zero, we will have accomplished a pretty miraculous thing.
Absolutely.
Wow. And I think that it's amazing that the two of you all have girls. With you talking about the dating violence, and I'll start with either one of you, what conversations do you have with your daughters, even as, elementary school, with experiencing hitting, or, do you start, what age, for some of the ladies who may be watching that have daughters now, what conversations should they be having with their middle school age or high school age daughters during this time?
I think we need to exhibit healthy dating relationships. What I am finding out over and over again when I talk to young people is I'll ask them the question, have your parents ever told you what it means to be in a healthy dating relationship? And by and large, 95, 96, 97% of the time, I get no hands raised, or maybe one in a room of 100. And so I think we are doing a disservice as parents. We have to start early, and we have to do it often. Definitely sixth grade, you're going into middle school, they're going to be exposed to things that they have never been exposed to before. It is important for us as parents to teach our children that it's okay for you to have boundaries. It's okay if someone is making you feel uncomfortable, if they're touching you, if they're saying things about you that make you feel uncomfortable. I am now giving you voice to that discomfort, and you have the right to say, you're making me uncomfortable. You're in my space. My daughter calls it her bubble. Mom, I don't want anybody in my bubble. And that it's okay that you have that bubble. And I think our girls need to understand that they don't just have to placate someone and say, oh, well, it's okay. I don't mind. No, you do mind. And I want you to stand up and say it with authority. Please don't do that. You make me feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah. Our girls, Luria, are young. They're 7 and 9. But I can tell you, from the minute they were old enough to know what a swimming suit is, we've had conversations about, these are the parts of your body that you have complete agency over this body, and these are the parts that are off limits. If it's covered by your bathing suit, there's nobody's business touching any of that. So we're very upfront, and we talk very frankly, but in terms they can understand. And so I would say we take sort of a three-prong approach. The first is modeling good relationships. I think Tamika's spot on there. What does it mean to be a loving partner? And we all have bad days, or you're grouchy at some point, but making sure that we're constantly aware that our kids are watching, and that we're modeling the kind of relationships, healthy relationships, we want them to have. Number 2 is, from the earliest age possible, teaching our women and girls agency over their own body, that this is yours, that you control, the access that anybody else has to it. I mean, it seems so basic, it almost sounds strange to say out loud, but that is critical here. And then last but not least, building in our girls a sense of inherent dignity and self-worth. And I think that's critical. And it's a place where, for communities of faith, your conversation in some ways is a little bit easier, right? When you believe that you are a child of God, you have that inherent dignity and worth. And I think coming back to that time and again is critical. So those are the things that we try to do as a family.
I like that with the swimsuit thing. I like that. I've never heard that before. I like that. I like that a lot. That's good. Tamika, going back to you, what, as a person who has not experienced domestic violence, but would want to help another person. And sometimes it can be frustrating if you see verbal abuse or you hear physical abuse, and you talk to the individual who may be a female in my context, and she continues to stay in that situation. As a friend, as a sister in Christ, what steps could I take, as many of our other friends may have? What could I do in that situation? Should I just back, some people back all the way off? Should we just be there to listen? What would you advise that we do if we have a friend in that situation?
I would advise you not to back off. One of the goals of the abuser is to isolate their victim so that they don't know that there is another way of life. And so what I would encourage you to do is be a strong supporter, be a listening ear for that person who's going through. You want to make sure that you're not judgmental, because you can never say what you would or wouldn't do until you are actually in that situation. I've had several clients that said, I never saw myself ending up here. No one ever goes out with the idea of, I'm going to be a battered woman. That doesn't come into play. Those things start to creep into a relationship later on. And what they need from us is support, because they're not going to leave the first time. Statistics show a woman will be abused and she will leave her abuser 7 times before she finally breaks from that relationship. So although we may get frustrated at the fact that she's staying in that relationship, I just say she's just working through her process. It's a process. Leaving a domestic violence relationship is a process, not an event. She doesn't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I guess I'm going to leave him today. She has to put things into place. And so if you continue to love on her and support her, show her the love of Christ, introduce her to people in your circle who may have resources that can help her and help her understand that there is another way of life and there is a way out, because maybe she doesn't know that. You might be that glimmer of hope that helps her understand, okay, well, maybe somebody can help me. Maybe there is an organization. Maybe I'm not the only one that's going through this. And so as she begins to open up to you, you can then put her in touch with people who could potentially save her life.
Wow. That's awesome information. And Sarah, I was going to ask you, locally and nationally, we have our elections coming up. What should we be looking for in candidates such as yourself who speak about, how they feel in certain situations? But what would you advise us as women to look for in a candidate?
Look for candidates who uplift women. Look for candidates who don't normalize abusive language around women. I don't know that any of the abusers your clients have had to face, Tamika, started out as a physical abuser. They may have started out with somebody who had normalized, nasty words for women. They may have started out with somebody who watched particularly violent content towards women. And somewhere along the line, the bells stopped ringing that this isn't quite right. And so look for candidates who uplift women. And by the way, if you want a representative, whether that's in the U.S. Senate, like the race that I am, or in your local county commission or city council, if you want a candidate who will center issues for women and family, one way to make sure we do that is to uplift women running for office. There have only been 57 women in the history of this country who have had the honor to serve in the United States Senate. 57. Wow. And if you think about it, is it any wonder that we're still talking about affordable childcare and paid leave and reproductive freedom and making sure that we have women and children who have food security via SNAP, or adequate health care, that nobody's sick because they're poor or poor because they're sick? Of course not. Because we are underrepresented there. Women, we're not at the table. It's better now than it's ever been, but we're not there yet. And so look for women running for office who share your values, and look for candidates, whether they're male or female, who uplift women. And if they don't support the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, the Paycheck Fairness Act, you've got to ask why. And I've got to tell you, for me individually, those are deal breakers. I don't want my daughters to be in the same scenario that we've grown up in, where women made tremendous gains, but they still hadn't achieved the kind of parity. And for women of color in particular, this is a devastating economic impact when you look at the pay gap. Black women's equal pay day is in August, meaning a Black woman has to work all the way through August of the following year to make what a white man in the same job made the year before. Wow. That's not okay. And candidates who want your vote, we need to say that over and over again until it changes.
I agree. Look, I could have let you go on and talk about that forever. I'm sitting here like, that's right. Yes. That's amazing. And it's so true, though. It makes so much sense because we have the power as the voter, to put who we'd like in office. And that's just astounding. 57 women, never knew that. I thought it would be way more than that.
And never once from Georgia elected. So we've had 2 female senators appointed. One served for about 24 hours over 100 years ago. And then we have one who served for less than 6 months this year. But Georgia has never elected a woman to the United States Senate. So we've got a chance to make history this year. I hope we'll take advantage of it.
I do too. Wow, that is amazing. I did not know that. Thank you for that. And in closing, I want to ask you two this question. I'll start with you, Ms. Daniel, about if we have a woman now who's watching, who may be going through everything that we've talked about. She's having a hard time right now. She wants to leave. She doesn't know how. What could you tell her to do in how to get out of a domestic violence relationship, whether it's verbal abuse or physical abuse? What would you say?
First, let me say that it's not your fault. What you're going through, you did not cause any of this. And so you don't take any ownership in that. You don't have to stay stuck where you are. There are statewide agencies. There is a domestic violence hotline that you can contact that will connect you with local services in your area. Maybe you're thinking, well, I don't want to go into a shelter. Calling the shelter doesn't mean you have to go into a shelter. They can help with financial resources. They can help you with locating housing. They can help you with getting a protective order. Absolutely reach out to my organization, Georgia Legal Services. We represent 154 of the 159 counties in the state of Georgia. And if we can't help you, we can refer you, if you're in the Atlanta area, to Atlanta Legal Aid Society. That's our sister organization. So there are free and there are free services available to help you break free from that situation and to stay safe. I am concerned about your safety and your well-being, and we can put you on the right road to connect you with those services in your community.
Wow, thank you for that. And Sarah, I know on your website you have all the information for the domestic violence hotline. What would you say, encouraging words or anything that you would want to say to a woman who may be watching and going through what we've been talking about?
I would echo what Tamika said. First and foremost, you have no culpability here. This is not your fault. But women, as long as there have been women on this planet, we have proven to be strong survivors. We have proven to be resourceful. We are fierce protectors of our children. And I would say not only is this not your fault, but I have complete faith that you can come through this. And if you're able to access the resources you need to get, whether it's out of the situation into a shelter, get to a family member, to get help from the police department, I believe that you can come to the other side of this. And I would also say, just to the women who are not in this situation, but have friends that they worry or they wonder about, I'd like to take a minute and just address y'all. If you have a friend and you suspect there's a domestic violence situation, do not be shy and do not delay. You need to check in. These are moments where many women are now shut into a home in lockdown with their abusers, in some cases with children in the home as well who are at risk. And this is a time to make sure we are our brother and sister's keeper. Make sure that we're checking on our loved ones, our dear ones, our friends. So don't worry about intruding. A good friend will know if there's nothing wrong that you were acting in her best interests, but don't delay. Be very direct and speak out, because these women are counting on sometimes their networks to help them pull themselves out of these situations.
Yes. Most definitely. And don't be afraid to reach out. We love you. There are people that really love you in your life. And even our church family, we love you. We have our prayer hotline. You can call us at any time. We also have our, let me give you the number, and it should be popping up on the screen. It's the 1-800-33-HAVEN. 1-800-33-HAVEN, and that's the domestic violence 24-hour hotline for Georgia. You can go on there. Somebody will be there at any time to speak with you. If you want to get out, they're there. And I'm sure you have friends and family who are supportive of whatever you decide to do, but we want you to know that we love you. And Going back to our guests, we're so excited that the two of you were with us today on the Pink Table Talk. Once again, Ms. Tamika Daniel, our lawyer who is out there fighting for justice every day. Thank you so much for being on with us, as well as Ms. Sarah Amico. You've seen their handles when they were talking. You can go on Facebook, Georgia Legal Services, as well as the Georgia Hotline. Please do whatever you got to do to stay alive, because we love you. Somebody loves you, and it's us. So thank you so much, ladies. Do you all have any closing remarks you want to say before we log off?
I just want to say thank you. Absolutely. Thank you to House of Hope for taking up this important topic. We need to have these types of tough discussions, and I appreciate you all for doing that.
This is the kind of sisterhood and conversation among women that actually gives me the hope to say, I believe these women can make it to the other side. It's programs like this and hosts like you and churches like House of Hope that give the outreach. Sometimes that may just be a lifeline somebody really needed.
Most definitely. Thank you so much to both of you, Sarah Amico, Tamika Daniel, Pink Table Talk Online. We're so glad to have you guys. Remember, love doesn't hurt. If you need us, we're here. See you guys the next time, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Washington is working really well for the folks who are well connected. But for people in the communities that I serve and people sitting around their kitchen table right now, I don't think it's working well. I still believe in the American dream, but there's a disconnect between the American people and what we're getting in Washington. We're seeing how this is working, and so I would challenge the people of Georgia to try something different. I'm Raphael Warnock, and I approve this message.
No woman wants to be in an abusive situation, but there are many things that keep a woman in a situation because she feels like she has no options.
When you see the devastation this wreaks on women and families, I think for people of good conscience, it's impossible to ignore.
What you're going through, you did not cause any of this, and so you don't take any ownership in that. You don't have to stay stuck where you are.
I thought I lost my voice, but it took 2 or 3 hours of devotional, going to therapy, exercise. You then realize you're not alone. You work and you pray, you'll be successful. And my brother always would tell me, it's like an equation. You got to put it together.
Man up now, man up.
By 16 years old, I was on my own.
Paying for everything?
Paying for the bills. I had a little telemarketing job that I was working at night, going to high school during the day. The emotional attachment that you're supposed to have, the respect you're supposed to have for your family, I never saw it. I think God has really favored me and my wife because we have such a story and we have a testimony that God can heal.
I want to talk to you about the stakes in this election as plainly as I can. If we're going to get this virus under control, get folks back to work, and make sure affordable health care is available for everybody, we've got to send people to Washington who aren't interested in playing political games or making themselves rich. We've got to elect folks who will get to work for people like you. That's why I'm supporting Reverend Raphael Warnock in the special election for Senate. Reverend Warnock's someone I've known for years. He's a man of great moral integrity, a leader in the truest sense of the word. He's spent his life pushing for justice, fighting to expand healthcare, protecting voting rights and the dignity of work. You don't find a lot of people in Washington like Reverend Warnock, and that's exactly why we got to get him there. Please join me in supporting Raphael Warnock for Senate.
I'm Raphael Warnock, and I know we can do better. That's why I approve this message.
I'm John Ossoff. Truth is, corruption in Washington has infected both parties. They're too busy serving lobbyists to serve us. I'll ban corporate political donations and secret corporate money in politics, and I'll crack down on price gouging by health insurance and drug companies who use that money to buy off Congress. We're all in this together. Together we can end the corruption and make healthcare affordable. Fighting corruption is my job, and that's why